Sometimes the most powerful moments don't happen in boardrooms or in the middle of million-dollar deals. Sometimes they happen when a broken man, still haunted by the loss of his little girl, hears two frightened children whisper, "Please, don't let her hurt us again." In that instant, every number, every contract, every title meant nothing. What mattered were the bruises hidden beneath tiny sleeves, the trembling voices too young to carry so much pain, and the desperate hope that maybe just Macy someone would finally stay. This is not just a story of rescue. It's about redemption, about a man rediscovering his heart when he thought it was lost forever. And it's about two sisters who dared to believe that love could come back for them. Stay with us, and if you believe in the healing power of love, subscribe to Loss and Healing now. The city skyline shimmered with glass and steel, its towers reflecting a late-morning sun that promised success to anyone who could climb high enough. Inside one of those towers, Benjamin Cross sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, his posture straight, but his soul adrift. Numbers filled the screen behind him, projections and bar graphs rising like monuments of control. His chief financial officer's voice carried on about a merger worth hundreds of millions, but Benjamin was not listening. His mind was elsewhere, far away from profits, strategies, and shareholders. In his hand rested a birthday card, the edges worn soft, the envelope still sealed in childish purple crayon. It had been sitting at the bottom of his desk for years, a reminder of what he had lost and of the silence that had followed. Maddie had written on the front, "To Daddy, do not open until my birthday." She never reached that birthday. He had carried the unopened card like a secret weight, one he never had the courage to lift. But today, in the middle of that sterile boardroom, something inside him shifted. He tore the envelope carefully and pulled out the folded card. Inside was a drawing, a little girl with curly hair swinging high into a bright blue sky, the ropes painted red with bold crayon strokes. Above her head she had written, "Even when I am not with you, we are still swinging together." The joy on her face was unshaken, fearless, the kind of joy that freezes time and brands itself on a father's heart forever. Benjamin's breath caught, his throat constricting as the boardroom walls blurred and collapsed around him. The future projected on the screen was meaningless next to a single crayon smile. He stood without explanation, tucking the card into his coat pocket, leaving silence behind him. Not a single voice tried to stop him. Perhaps they knew better, or perhaps they simply knew they could not touch the storm he carried. He walked out of the tower, down into the streets, and kept going until the noise of the city thinned into the softer rustle of Lincoln Park. The northern edge was quiet, the kind of place where tourists seldom wandered. He sank onto a cracked stone bench beside a tired fountain, the cold breeze off the lake biting his skin, but the ache in his chest was far sharper than the wind. At first, he did not notice the two small figures huddled in the distance, shadows crouched behind the weathered lion statue. His gaze was locked on the card pressed in his palm, the echo of Maddie's voice still alive in his memory. Then a movement pulled his eyes up. One of the children, tall for her age but wrapped in clothes too big, stepped forward. She could not have been older than 7. A brown jacket hung loosely over her small frame, jeans torn at the knees, and a pink t-shirt peeked out beneath. Her arms spread wide in a gesture that was both protective and pleading, shielding the smaller girl behind her. "Please, mister," she said, her voice strained but steady. "Do not let her find us." Benjamin blinked, startled back into the present. "Who?" he asked softly. The smaller child peeked from behind her sister. She was tiny, no more than 5, pale and barefoot, clutching a wrinkled paper bag to her chest. Her lips were chapped, her hair uncombed, and her shoulders shook against the cold. She stepped forward, her eyes impossibly old for such a small face. In a whisper that trembled like glass, she said, "She hurts us when we cry." The words carved into Benjamin like a blade. Before he could answer, the little girl lifted her sleeve, revealing a bruise dark and raw across her thin arm. Rage and sorrow collided inside him until the world around him disappeared. There was only the bruise, only the wound that had no business living on a child's skin. His fists clenched tight enough to ache. The older girl pulled her sister back, her jaw trembling. "We did not mean to bother you," she murmured. "We were just hiding. We will go." "No," Benjamin said, his voice rougher than he meant. He took a breath, steadied it. "You are not in trouble. Are you hungry?" They both nodded, hesitant but silent. Slowly, he slipped his wool coat from his shoulders and wrapped it around the younger girl. She flinched, but after a moment leaned into the warmth. The older girl stayed upright, her stance protective, her eyes sharp with mistrust. "She told us not to talk to strangers," the girl said firmly. "You are right," Benjamin replied, lowering himself to meet her gaze at eye level. "That is wise. But I promise I will not hurt you. I just want to get you warm and safe." He realized how weak promises must have sounded to children who had already endured too many broken ones. Still, he offered what he could: shelter, food, and his presence. The younger girl's small nod gave permission. Benjamin stood carefully, gesturing toward the nearby street. "There is a diner just down that way. Pancakes all day. Nothing fancy." The girls followed, silently, each step cautious, every glance backward heavy with fear. Inside the diner, warmth embraced them like a forgotten memory. The place smelled of coffee and bacon, with booths lined in red vinyl and checkered floors scuffed from decades of use. Benjamin led the girls to a booth away from the windows, his eyes scanning the street before sitting. The waitress approached, kindness in her eyes though her gaze lingered on the children's bare feet. Benjamin ordered hot chocolate, pancakes, and anything else they wanted. She nodded without asking questions, disappearing to fill the request. Rosie, he would soon learn her name, wrapped both hands around the steaming mug when it arrived. She inhaled the rising warmth, eyes fluttering closed as if savoring safety itself. Laya, the older sister, sat stiff and protective, her arms around her sibling, like she could shield her from the whole world. They devoured the food, with an urgency that broke Benjamin's heart, eating as if they did not know when they would be fed again. He sat helpless, watching. A man who had once negotiated billions, but now found himself struggling with the weight of 2 empty stomachs and 2 frightened hearts. Then everything shifted again. Through the window, a woman in a tan trench coat stood across the street, scanning the crowd with sharp, restless movements. Laya froze, her fork clattering onto the plate. Her small hand shot out, clutching Benjamin's coat sleeve. Her whisper cut like a cry in the dark. "It is her. Please, please do not let her hurt us again." Benjamin's jaw tightened, his grief crystallizing into a cold, immovable purpose. He leaned close, his voice steady. "She will not touch either of you again." He guided them out through the kitchen, past swinging doors and startled staff, into the alley beyond. The wind was harsher there, but none of them felt it. Benjamin knew only one truth. In that moment, these girls had anchored him to something real, something vital. He had found a reason to fight again, and he was not going to let go. The motel sat at the edge of the city, the kind of place where silence pressed in like a secret. The neon sign flickered weakly above cracked pavement, and the lobby smelled faintly of smoke and old carpet. Benjamin paid in cash, his hood low, his voice curt. The clerk asked no questions, only slid a keycard across the counter, muttering, "Room 208. That was the point of a place like this. Money kept lips sealed. He turned toward the vending machines where the 2 sisters stood close together, one arm wrapped around the other like a lifeline. Rosie clutched a towel draped over her shoulders like a cape, while Laya scanned every corner of the lobby, eyes darting with the alertness of someone twice her age. They looked like children pretending to be warriors, forced into battles they never chose. Inside the room, the air was stale, the curtains heavy, the thin blankets pulled tight across the beds. Benjamin switched on the heater, adjusting it until warm air hummed softly into the space. He had stopped on the way to grab groceries, dropping juice boxes, cereal bars, fruit cups, and 2 small stuffed animals onto the dresser. He had not meant to buy the toys, but when Rosie froze in the store aisle at the sight of them, he could not walk past. He told himself it was nothing, just a gesture, but deep down he knew it meant something more. The girls climbed onto the bed together, curling under the covers. "We won't be any trouble," Laya whispered, her voice so soft he almost missed it. "Promise!" Benjamin crouched, sliding a bottle of water toward Rosie. Her tiny hands wrapped around it like it was fragile crystal. Her fingers trembled. "I don't care about trouble," he said gently. "I care about you being safe." He meant it. The television flickered in the corner, set low, filling the silence with voices that did not belong to them. But the tension in the room never eased. When a garbage truck roared outside, Rosie flinched and buried her face against her sister. Laya did not move, as though fear had long ago become too familiar to show. Benjamin sat on the opposite bed, elbows on his knees, his mind circling around the broken pieces of his own past. Maddie's absence had left him hollow for years. Now, looking at these two girls, something fragile and raw stirred again. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Logic told him to call the police, to involve social services, to report abuse. That was the adult thing, the responsible step. But then he saw Rosie's wide eyes, the way she gripped her sister's arm at every sound, and he imagined the system handing them right back to the woman who had hurt them. He had seen it before. He had witnessed corruption, money, and lies win in rooms where truth had no weight. His thumb did not move. "I think we need another plan," he said finally. Laya lifted her chin, watching him. "Aren't you going to call someone?" "I will," he answered, voice steady but low. "Just not the police. Not yet." Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" He sighed. Brutal honesty was the only thing they deserved. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to help don't. Sometimes they make it worse. Rosie, quiet until then, whispered into the dim room. "Last time we asked for help, they sent us back. We told them, but she had more papers. She laughed all the way home." The chill in Benjamin's chest deepened. Monsters could wear perfume and sign documents with perfect handwriting. He leaned back, exhaling slowly.
It'll be okay, I promise.
"You said she's not your mother," he murmured.
Are you sure?
Laya nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Our real mom is Naomi. Naomi Langston. She used to sing us to sleep. She told us we were her sunshine." Her voice broke, but she pushed through. "Then she got sick. Claire came, said she would help, said we would be safe. But she locked us in closets. She took our food. She hit Rosie when I cried. Rosie's body stiffened, her small shoulders rising and falling with the weight of memories too heavy for her frame." Benjamin could not swallow the rage clawing up his throat. He had sat in polished offices with powerful men crying over lost millions, and here were two little girls surviving losses that no child should even know existed. He felt useless, sitting with only a wallet and a will to act. But uselessness was not an option anymore. That night, long after the girls had drifted into uneasy sleep, tangled together under thin blankets, Benjamin sat by the window with his laptop open and his phone pressed to his ear.
Hello.
He
My
called
name is
in
Mark.
every
I am
favor,
deaf.
every investigator, every friend who still owed him something. He demanded access logs, medical files, anything connected to Naomi Langston. Hours passed until a lead broke through. Naomi had been placed in a psychiatric facility under temporary guardianship signed by Claire Monroe. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the documents. Not only had Naomi been isolated, her records listed no known children. The system had not overlooked her. It had erased her. The realization struck with brutal clarity. Claire had buried the truth under paperwork and lies, and the world
Allow
had
me,
let her.
please.
Benjamin clenched his fists.
Thank you
He
so
could
much.
not bring Maddie back, but he could fight for Laya and Rosie and for the mother who had been stolen from them. Behind him, a movement caught his attention. Laya stood barefoot in the bathroom doorway, wrapped in a blanket like armor. Her eyes were too alert for midnight. "Can't sleep," she murmured. He closed the laptop gently. "Bad dreams?" She shook her head. "Just thinking." He knelt to her level. "What about?" Her gaze did not waver. "If Mom's alive, why didn't she come for us?" Benjamin's chest ached. He drew a breath. "Because someone didn't let her. Because someone made sure she couldn't." Laya's lip
After
quivered.
you.
"So she
I don't
didn't
know."
leave us?" "No, sweetheart," he whispered. "She never left you. Someone took her away." Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time, her shoulders eased, even just a little. She turned back to bed without another word, curling beside Rosie once more. Benjamin watched them, a fire igniting in his chest. For years, he had been drifting, his life ruled by balance sheets and deadlines, a man surviving rather than living. Tonight, he had a mission again. It was no longer about grief alone. It was about protection, about justice, and about building a future where two little girls could sleep without fear. He sat by the window until
Everything's going to
dawn,
be all right,
the
my
city
dears.
lights flickering against the dark horizon. His mind steady with a single thought. Tomorrow, he would find Naomi. And tomorrow, he would start tearing down the lies that had kept a mother from her children. The road out of the city stretched like a ribbon, unraveling into silence. Benjamin drove with steady hands, the girls asleep in the back seat, their small bodies curled together under a borrowed
We have outlined a
blanket.
safe and
The
reliable
sky
plan for
darkened as the
everyone involved.
miles passed. Telephone poles leaning tiredly
Everyone
over
understands.
gravel roads that seemed forgotten by time. His GPS signal flickered, Cell service dropped, and for the first time in years, Benjamin felt the weight of being utterly alone with nothing but his promise to guide him. Ashgrove Psychiatric Center appeared out of the trees like a secret no one wanted to uncover. The building was gray concrete, its windows narrow and lifeless, its iron gate buzzing reluctantly as it opened. He parked, adjusted his coat, and walked inside with the steady presence of a man who had once faced hostile takeovers.
And this for you.
But there was something different in his eyes now. This was not about power. It was about purpose. The lobby was cold and sterile, the kind of place designed to keep people out as much as to keep them in. A nurse with tired eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Visits are by appointment only," she said, her tone clipped. Benjamin pulled a folded document from his coat, the kind of legal authorization his network could produce in hours when others waited weeks. "I have power of attorney pending court transfer," he said firmly. His voice carried a weight that made her pause. After a brief, tense phone call, she handed him a clipboard and murmured, "Room 312, third floor. She does not get many visitors." The elevator hummed as it climbed slowly, the fluorescent light above flickering. When the door slid open, the hallway stretched long and silent, punctuated only by the muted beeping of monitors behind closed doors. Benjamin walked until he reached the last room. He knocked once, then pushed it open. The air inside was heavy, not from temperature but from something emptier. Naomi Langston sat in a padded chair near the window, her gaze fixed on nothing, her hair tangled and thin, her frame swallowed by a faded sweater. She did not turn at first, as though her body had learned not to expect company. When she finally glanced at him, her eyes were dull, stripped of recognition. Benjamin crouched a few feet away. "Naomi?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, the sound barely escaping. "Do I know you?" "No," he answered, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "But I know your daughters, Laia and Rosie." Her body jerked, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "The girls?" "Yes," Benjamin nodded. "They are safe. They have been looking for you." Tears filled her eyes instantly, though disbelief lingered in every line of her face. "I thought I dreamed them," she whispered. "Sometimes I hear their voices, smell Rosie's hair. I thought it was the medicine." "It is not a dream," Benjamin said firmly. "They ran from Claire.
Yes, it
they
is.
told me what happened. I have been helping them." Naomi shook her head in confusion, her voice cracking. "Claire said I was unstable, that I needed rest, that she would care for them until I was better. Then she stopped coming. I begged for updates, but they told me nothing. They said I was too dangerous to be a mother." Benjamin leaned closer, lowering his tone. "She lied. She did not just isolate you. She erased you." Naomi's breath hitched, her body folding inward as sobs spilled from her chest. Benjamin stayed silent, only sliding a box of tissues closer. For minutes, he let her weep, the dam of months and years breaking all at once. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. "Are they really all right?" "They are scared, and they are hurting," Benjamin said honestly. "But yes, they are alive. They miss you." Her trembling hands clutched a tissue like it might tether her to reality. Laia always tried to be strong. Rosie still sucked her thumb when she slept. "God, I should have fought harder. I should not have let them down."
I need to speak
"You
to
were
someone.
silenced,"
Discreetly.
Benjamin told her, his voice sharp with conviction. "Drugged, cut off, lied to. You were not weak, you were trapped. But you are not powerless anymore." She turned to him, her eyes searching. "Who are you?" "Just a man who knows what it feels like to lose a child," he said, his throat tightening. "And I made a promise I intend to keep." She pressed a hand to her face, tears still streaking her cheeks. Slowly, she reached under the cushion of her chair and pulled out a crumpled photograph. "They let me keep this. Just this." He took the picture carefully. It showed two little girls on a swing set, arms stretched toward the sky. Naomi stood behind them, her smile wide, her hair free in the wind. Benjamin stared at the image, his chest constricting. "Laia's smile looks exactly the same," he murmured. Naomi's lips trembled. Later that day, Benjamin confronted the facility director, a man who hid behind policies and paperwork. Benjamin placed a binder on his desk. "Affidavits? Medical evaluations? Legal statements? She is not a threat," he said flatly. "She is a mother, and I am transferring her to Northwestern Memorial under my company's private care division." "You do not have that authority," the director scoffed. "You are right," Benjamin replied, sliding another document across the desk. "But now I do." Back in Naomi's room, he helped her into a coat. her belongings fitting into a single small bag. At the doorway, she hesitated, her voice breaking. "Are you sure they want to see me?" Benjamin looked her straight in the eyes. They have been waiting. That night, when Naomi stepped into the motel room, the air cracked open with a sound so raw it felt holy. Rosie cried, "Mom!" before collapsing into her arms. Laya followed, nearly knocking her to the floor with the force of her embrace. Naomi's sobs echoed against the thin walls, unrestrained and loud, the kind of grief and relief that only a mother could know. She pressed her face into their hair, whispering, "Never, I never left you." Benjamin turned away, giving them privacy. His eyes burned as he stood near the door, watching a family piece itself back together in real time. For years, he had been drowning in grief. Tonight, he saw love resurrect itself, and it left him breathless.
Your Honor,
The lake stretched wide and still, its surface painted with the light of a pale morning. Benjamin's lake house had always been quiet, a place built for investors' retreats and evenings of polished solitude. But as he carried Naomi inside, her weight fragile against his arm, the house felt different. It was no longer a retreat. It was a beginning. Naomi whispered her daughter's names under her breath as though repeating them could make them more real. Rosie, Laya, over and over like a prayer she did not want to forget. In the kitchen, Teresa, a housekeeper Benjamin trusted like family, guided the girls through shelves stacked with books, stuffed animals, and food. Rosie gasped softly at the sight of a room filled with color, toys, and warmth. Laya hung back, scanning corners, searching for locks and shadows, her mistrust stitched into her bones. When Naomi stepped through the doorway, everything stopped. Rosie squealed, running with arms open, and Naomi collapsed to her knees before she could even steady herself. Laya followed, crashing into her embrace. All three clung together on the floor, tears soaking sweaters and tangled hair. Naomi sobbed openly, not with restraint, but with the rawness of years stolen. "I thought you were gone," Laya cried. "Claire said you left. She said you did not want us." Naomi cupped her daughter's faces, trembling. "Never, not for 1 second, you are my life. I love you more than anything." Rosie pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, her small voice muffled but firm. "We knew you did not leave." Benjamin turned away, letting them have the moment, but his throat tightened with the weight of it. For years, he had known only emptiness when thinking of Maddie. Now he saw proof that love could be torn apart and still knit itself back together. He whispered to Teresa, "Give them time." The rest of the day moved with a rhythm none of them expected. Naomi settled onto the couch, her daughters clinging to her sides. Laya produced the set of markers Benjamin had bought, spreading papers across the floor. Rosie curled beneath the blanket, eyelids heavy, as Naomi stroked her hair gently. For hours, Benjamin sat in the kitchen, flipping through documents, calling his legal team, confirming Naomi's therapy schedule. Every so often, he glanced into the living room, watching color return to a home that had been lifeless for too long. By evening, the lake house carried a sound it had never known before: peace. Rosie's laughter bubbled faintly as she drew. Laya asked careful questions about where they would sleep, and Naomi, exhausted but smiling, hummed a lullaby Benjamin recognized from the photo Naomi had carried. But the peace was not unchallenged. Claire was not gone. Legal notices soon arrived, hand-delivered with heavy seals and official signatures. Charges of kidnapping, defamation, and interference with custody were stacked against Benjamin like weapons. He read them quietly, the lines cold but predictable.
You found your voice again.
When Naomi saw them, her jaw clenched. "Are you scared?" she asked. "No," Benjamin said calmly. "I am angry, and I am ready." The girls, shielded from the details, built drawings of families with stick figures and suns. One paper had 3 figures beneath a smiling sun, the tallest drawn with square shoulders and a blue tie. "Is that me?" Benjamin asked softly. Laya nodded. Rosie giggled, pointing at the sun. "That is Mom. She is the sunshine." Benjamin sat in silence, adding a small brown dog beside the figures. "We do not have a dog," Laya pointed out. "Not yet," he said, "but maybe someday." The house began to pulse with rituals of safety. Breakfasts with cinnamon rolls, afternoons of homework at the kitchen table, evenings by the fireplace with lanterns glowing overhead. Naomi began to heal, not only in her body, but in her spirit.
Let me help you up.
She slept deeper, smiled more often, and even hummed while organizing the pantry alphabetically. The smallest actions, ordinary to others, were monumental here. One night, Rosie knocked on Benjamin's study door holding a drawing. 4 stick figures stood in front of a house, a heart floating above it. "This is our home," she said proudly. Her handwriting spelled, "Our house, our happy." Benjamin felt the sting in his eyes before he could stop it. Later, Laya wandered in as he assembled a desk for her art supplies. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her voice small. "Were you always this kind?"
Oh my
Benjamin
God,
paused.
This is amazing.
"No, not always. I lost my daughter once. I shut everything down after that. I was afraid of feeling anything again." Laya nodded slowly, as though she understood too
what
well.
I drew.
"But then you found us.
It's our
Then you and
family.
Rosie found me," Benjamin corrected gently.
Are we
"And I
going to live
realized
in a nice
feeling is the
house
only way
or an
back."
apartment?
She smiled
We're going
faintly.
to find a
"I
very
used to
nice
pretend
place for
someone
us.
would come for us.
It is
Not
all
because
going
we
to
were
be
special,
okay.
but because someone had to, like in books." Benjamin tightened a screw on the desk, his voice quiet. "Sometimes life copies books. And sometimes we write our own ending." Together
the
they
milk
finished
is
the
gonna go
desk,
right
the sound
here.
of screws and wood soft against the hum of the heater. That night, Naomi prepared
To us
roasted
and to
chicken
our future
and green
endeavors.
beans. The 4 of them gathered around the oak dining table, laughter echoing as Rosie stole bites off her sister's plate. When Naomi raised her glass of sparkling juice, her voice trembled with gratitude. "To those who show up when others leave." Benjamin lifted his glass without a word.
Cheers.
For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged at a table again. The lake shimmered outside, the moon casting light across water that once mirrored only loneliness. Now it reflected something new. A family, fragile but real, built not by blood alone but by choice, resilience, and the courage to love again. The courthouse towered over the city like a monument carved out of stone and authority. Its cold columns seemed to sneer at those who entered, as if warning them that truth was not always enough. Benjamin had stood in front of powerful committees, had spoken to rooms of men who controlled economies, but nothing weighed heavier on him than walking Naomi into that building. Her daughters were not with them. They were safe at the lake house with Teresa and a small security team. He would not let them witness this battle. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the sterile air filled with the shuffle of papers and the murmur of lawyers.
Look at my family.
Naomi sat beside him at the plaintiff's table, her hands trembling slightly but her back straight. Her cheeks had regained color over the weeks, and her eyes carried something stronger than fear. She was not the broken figure he had met in a padded chair. She was a mother, rising. Claire Monroe entered fashionably late, her blonde hair sleek, her trench coat the color of quiet wealth. 2 attorneys flanked her, their suits sharp, their expressions carefully rehearsed. Claire carried herself as if the courtroom were an inconvenience, a temporary detour before brunch. She met Naomi's eyes once and smirked. Naomi did not blink. Judge Ortega entered, her presence commanding the room with the simple bang of a gavel. She was known for cutting through theatrics, and today her eyes were sharp. "Let us begin," she said. Claire's lawyers spoke first, painting her as a selfless guardian. Their voices dripped with rehearsed compassion, describing a woman who had stepped in to save 2
is the
abandoned
house
girls
where I live.
while their unstable mother
Oh,
collapsed into illness. They presented records, reports of prescription misuse, notes signed by professionals whose loyalty Claire had purchased with subtlety and power. Naomi flinched at the words but held her silence. Benjamin leaned
Were
close.
you always
"They are
kind?
throwing everything they have," he whispered.
Always
"That means
kind.
they are scared."
Yes.
Then it was their turn. Benjamin
It feels
stood
like a lifetime
first.
ago now.
His voice was steady, not the commanding tone of a CEO, but
But
the
in your own
calm
words.
certainty of a man telling the truth.
So,
He told the court how he had met
If
2
you-
little girls in Lincoln Park, barefoot, bruised, whispering for someone to keep them safe. He described the diner, the bruise Rosie had shown him, the fear etched into Laya's every movement. He presented photographs, a pediatrician's report, and the sworn statement of a forensic psychologist. He spoke of the kind of fear that no child should know, and the courtroom fell still. Then Naomi walked to the stand. She did not rush.
what a nice
She carried
boy.
herself like someone
I think
reclaiming
you
her
like it?
place in the
Yes.
world. "I want my daughters to know they were never forgotten," she said. Her voice was soft but carried through the silence. She told them of her illness,
That is
of
what we're going to
exhaustion
use
that had
to
left
put
her
our ideas
vulnerable,
into
of
action.
how Claire had appeared offering help, how guardianship papers had been signed while she was under heavy sedation. She told them of the letters she had written that came back unopened, the calls that went unanswered, the visits that were canceled one by one until there was nothing left but silence.
I am not
"They told me
afraid.
I was a danger," she said, her voice trembling but unbroken. But the danger was trusting the wrong person. Claire's attorney jumped to his feet. Unfounded accusation, Your Honor. Judge Ortega raised her hand. Sit down. Continue, Mrs. Langston. Naomi drew a long breath. If I am broken, it is because someone tried to silence a mother's love. But I am still standing, and I will stand for them. The room was silent. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering above the keys. Claire shifted in her seat, her smirk fading. Benjamin rose again, holding up a child's drawing. Rosie's handwriting, shaky but determined, captioned the page. Our house, our happy. He showed the stick figures under the sun, the tall figure drawn with broad shoulders in blue. This is how they survived, Benjamin said. With hope, with memory, with the courage to run toward the first person who listened. One of Claire's attorneys fired a final question. Mr. Cross, you are not their family. Why go through all this trouble? Benjamin looked directly at him. Because someone had to. Because I lost a child once. And when I met those girls, I realized I had been breathing but not living. They woke me up, and I will not leave them behind. The judge recessed for an hour. Naomi sat beside him on a wooden bench in the hallway, her hands clasped tightly together. I thought the hardest part would be seeing her again, she said quietly. But it was harder remembering who I used to be. The woman who sang lullabies, the one who knew how to fight. You did not forget, Benjamin said. You were silenced. But today, you found your voice again. When the court reconvened, there was no delay. Judge Ortega's words were clear. This court finds that guardianship was obtained under deceptive and unethical circumstances. Effective immediately, custody of Laya and Rosie Langston is restored to their biological mother, Naomi Langston. Furthermore, protective status is granted to Mr. Benjamin Cross during the transition period. Naomi gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Benjamin closed his eyes, letting the weight of the verdict sink in. Claire sat frozen, her expression cracked with disbelief. Judge Ortega turned her gaze toward her. Monroe, you are fortunate I am not forwarding this to criminal court, but let me be clear. If you come within 50 feet of these children, I will reconsider. Naomi wept openly, her relief uncontainable. She looked at Benjamin, her voice a whisper. I thought I would never bloom again. Benjamin rose, extending his arm to her. Then let us bloom together. When they stepped outside, the sun was waiting. Reporters gathered at the steps, cameras flashing, voices calling questions. But Benjamin lifted a hand and shielded Naomi in the verdict that belonged not to the world but to them. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of justice tilt toward what was right. Beside him, Naomi clutched a drawing of her daughters, and together they walked into the light. The lake house no longer felt like an echo chamber for one man's silence. It had been built for solitude, polished wood, and wide glass, meant to impress investors with serenity. Now it pulsed with something far stronger than quiet. It pulsed with life. The clink of dishes in the kitchen, the rustle of paper lanterns above the fireplace, the sound of Rosie humming off-key to her stuffed bear. These sounds were the music of a home being stitched back together. Naomi moved differently now. She still carried the shadows of what had been taken, but her steps were steady, her eyes clearer. The stiffness that had once kept her locked in herself was fading, replaced by laughter that rose when Rosie spilled juice, or when Leia teased her about alphabetizing the spice rack. Healing was slow, imperfect, but visible in the smallest details. Benjamin had shifted too. He was no longer only a man sitting in silence with his grief. He found himself laughing when Rosie tugged at his tie to make it crooked, or when Laya asked him impossible questions late at night. He was surprised by how natural it felt to kneel on the floor and help with homework or to assemble desks and paint supplies, as if he had been waiting all his life to do it. One evening, as Naomi served roasted chicken and green beans, she lifted a glass of sparkling juice. Her voice was soft but sure. To those who show up when others leave. Benjamin met her eyes across the table. He did not need to speak. The clink of their glasses carried enough. The weeks unfolded with rituals that grew roots into their days. Pancakes in the morning, Rosie's drawings taped to the refrigerator, Laya staying up late with a book under her pillow. The lanterns above the fireplace glowed each night like small reminders that light could exist even after so much darkness. Naomi began volunteering at a women's shelter, telling her story not with bitterness but with strength. She spoke of being silenced, of being erased, of how a single act of kindness had rerouted everything. I survived, she told them. Not because I was strong, but because someone saw
Maybe
me when
someday
I was
now.
invisible. Benjamin sat in the back once, silent, watching the women in the room lean forward to catch every word. But healing did not erase conflict. Claire filed charges, and subpoenas arrived like weapons wrapped in envelopes. The legal battles would not vanish easily. Yet Benjamin felt no fear now. Anger burned steady in his chest, but it was guided by clarity. He knew who he was fighting for, and that made him unshakable. The girls, blissfully unaware of most of the legal storm, staged a play in the backyard. Paper lanterns hung from the oak tree, folding chairs lined up in crooked rows. Laya directed with the seriousness of a general, while Rosie improvised lines and giggled when she forgot them. The story was simple. Two lost sisters, a villain who locked them away,
Good night.
and a stranger who listened. At
Good
the
night.
end, the three characters stood together holding paper hearts high above their heads. Naomi wiped her eyes while Benjamin
Of course.
applauded softly. Rosie ran to him breathless. "Did we do good?"
Love
she
is not
asked.
gone forever.
He pulled her into his arms. "You did perfect." Later, Naomi joined him on the porch, 2 mugs of cocoa steaming between them. "I never thought I could trust another man again," she admitted quietly. Benjamin looked at her, the ache in his chest shifting into something softer. "I never thought I could love again," he said. "Not after Maddie. I thought that part of me had died." Naomi touched his hand, not as romance, but as truth. It did not die. It was waiting for the right
Yes, it
place
is.
to land. A few nights later, under the same oak tree, Benjamin knelt and opened a small velvet box. His words were simple, trembling. "I thought I was done being a father, done being a husband, but I was wrong. I want to be someone who stays, if you will have me." Naomi's yes was immediate, tears falling but her smile unwavering. Their wedding was quiet, held in the backyard with Rosie scattering flower petals and Laya holding her mother's hand as she walked forward. Naomi wore an ivory dress, her hair braided by her daughter's careful fingers. Benjamin waited beneath the branches, his eyes not filled
I
with
brought some
power or
tea.
grief, but with peace.
Wonderful.
The vows were handwritten on notebook paper. Naomi's voice shook as she said, "You did not just find us, you chose us. You stayed when you did not have to. You made us whole." Benjamin's voice trembled in response. "You taught me what comes after grief. Love is not something we lose forever. Sometimes it returns in a different form." Afterward, they danced barefoot in the grass, Rosie twirling until she collapsed in laughter. Laya leaned against Benjamin's side, her small frame anchored by trust. Naomi watched from the porch, her hand resting over her heart, her smile full of quiet triumph. As the sun sank below the trees, the family walked down to the edge of the lake, their shadows stretching long and golden. Laya looked up at Benjamin, her eyes soft but steady. "I am glad we ran away that day," she whispered. Benjamin squeezed her hand gently. "No, sweetheart, you did not run away. You ran home." And this time, none of them ever had to leave again. There are stories that feel less like fiction and more like echoes of the truths we all carry. This one began with 2 frightened voices, whispering for safety, and a man who thought his heart had nothing left to give. It grew into a fight against lies, a reunion once thought impossible, and a family stitched together by choice as much as by blood. But beneath every detail, what mattered most was simple: the courage to keep showing up for one another. Benjamin Cross was a man who had everything the world defined as success, wealth, influence, power, yet he was empty. It took 2 little girls, bruised and trembling, to remind him that success means nothing without love, that grief can bury us, but it can also reshape us. By choosing to stay, by refusing to look away, he discovered something the world could never buy back for him: purpose. Naomi Langston was a mother who had been silenced, erased by paperwork and lies. She had been told her voice did not matter, that her children were lost, that she was dangerous for loving too much,
How was
and
your
yet
day,
love
honey?
could not be erased.
Mom.
It lived in every lullaby she remembered, in every tear she shed alone, in every heartbeat that whispered her daughter's names. When she was reunited with Laya and Rosie, it was not just a reunion. It was the proof that
That's a
truth
good one.
endures, even when the world tries to bury it. And the
Yes.
girls' 2 small souls who should have known only innocence and laughter
really good.
became the bravest of them all.
Yeah, it's
They
perfect.
carried scars too deep for their years, but they also carried hope. They dared to trust a stranger, dared to believe that someone would finally choose them. And in doing so, they taught everyone around them what resilience truly looks like. This story is not about wealth or courtrooms or the weight of corporate power. It is about the kind of love that rises from ashes, the kind of healing that takes root when people choose one another against all odds. It is about showing up. When others leave, when systems fail, when hope feels distant, showing up can change everything. If this story touched you, let it remind you that you too can be that person who stays. You can be the reason someone believes in love again. And if you believe in the power of resilience, redemption, and healing, join us on this journey. Subscribe to Loss and Healing and help us share more stories that remind the world love is never truly gone. It is waiting, ready to bloom again in all of us.